What movie death scene is burned into your memory? When the bad guy kills the shoe by dipping it into the goo in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That one is so fucking terrible. Man, if you think about it, those two oons don't even have the notion of what death is. When a toon is shot in the face, they just get real dirty or, worst case scenario, turned into a cartoon angel only to come back to normal by next week. Not that shoe, though. The shoe is gone forever. It's the first and only one of their kind to ever meet total oblivion and just die for good. That's gotta be a doozy. Fun fact for anyone who doesn't know, the dip in Who Framed Roger Rabbit is described as being a combination of turpentine, acetone, and benzene. Combined in the real world, these paint-thinning ingredients make up the solution that hand animators use to remove ink from animation cells. Something I read on Reddit in a similar thread, that I refuse to fact-check because it makes me feel better, is that every single actor on set played with that baby every time the camera cut because it was such a heavy scene. Apparently the baby was just super stoked to get all the attention and it helped the actors and crew deal with it. Edit, I took a risk and googled it and it's true. According to the twins who played the baby, we weren't on the set a lot but, when we were, apparently everyone was a bit more relaxed and all doing baby stuff with us, so it helped to take away a lot of the tension from filming such hard scenes. The scene from The Brave Little Toaster where the air conditioner goes off the deep end and explodes himself. I'm not an invalid. I like being stuck in this wall. IT's my function. Update. I had no idea this movie was so influential to other people too. I'm glad I'm not alone because I don't know many people who've even heard of it. Kurtwood Smith's voice when he finds Neil's body. Just thinking about it now is giving me chills. So much sorrow and desperate regret. His character spent the entire movie being a classic mid-century abusive and autocratic father. And then he just breaks into pieces when he realizes his son is now permanently beyond his reach. He'll never chastise him again, never guide him, never see him smile or hear him slam the door to the fridge or see him graduate or get married or have kids. And in that one moment, in his voice, you can hear him realizing that it wasn't worth it, that the price was too high and he'd take it all back if he could. Being the man he was in the time he papers over the cracks in his soul pretty quickly, and I'd be surprised if he and his wife speak more than 100 words to each other over the coming decade. He'll shrivel up inside, and be dead from that day forward, because he lacks the ability to internalize what his mistakes helped bring about. He won't become a kinder, gentler man, because he can't. But he will suffer, every day for the rest of his life, because he knows deep down that none of what he thought mattered was anywhere near as important as his son's life. Kurtwood Smith is an amazing and underrated actor, is what I'm saying. I think the beginning scene where he's just lying there, waiting to die along with the other forgotten people is really profound alone. Then the movie goes into his life and what a loving and vibrant child he was and ends with the scene of him dying there, and nobody caring at all until his sister comes to get him. Ugh, so heart-wrenching. Oh Jesus, this is another one that still gets me. Not his death so much, but the girl's reaction at the funeral. He can't see without his glasses, still makes me sob to this day, and I first saw it in the cinema when it was released. This thread is either really good for me or really bad for me right now, I dunno, but my partner died last week and it kind of feels good to have all these comments making me think of other things that make me cry. Not sure what that's about. I'm amazed at how far I had to scroll for this. It's probably because it was the first time I really saw a main character die. Maybe it was because it was a kid around my age at the time, and it wasn't an action movie death. The glasses falling gets me every time. But what kills me is when she runs into the funeral and insists that he needs his glasses. This is a girl who sees death literally daily and yet she can't really process it when it's someone she loves. Even thinking about it brings me back to the way it felt to see it the first time. I haven't seen the movie yet, but the book really makes you hate those people's guts for what they do to the children, and yet, somehow, King manages to show them as human as one can get. They aren't just big evil monsters, They are still people, horrible shitty people that nobody will miss and that deserve the harshest of punishments, but still somewhat human. It is quite a good read, and I really recommend it, as well as The Shining. Yes, and it finishes off his arc so well. Initially headstrong and dismissive of the Ring's lore, succumbing to it for that instant, then wanting to redeem himself, protecting the hobbits. The fact the first thing he says when Aragorn gets to him isn't his big "my captain, my king" or some Gondor stuff. It's they've taken the little ones thinking of the innocent before anyone or himself. Absolutely perfect. Not the movie, but there was an episode of MASH I saw as a kid that traumatizes me to this day. The whole episode, which I haven't seen since I was about 9, so forgive any incorrect details, is about a group of army and civilians hiding from the enemy. One lady has a chicken, and they keep telling her to keep it quiet because if it gives away their position they'll all be dead. We find out she smothered the chicken to death to save everyone, but the horror twist is that the soldier telling the story had replaced the actual source of the noise, her human baby, with a chicken because it was so horrible. I have children now and the thought of making that choice makes me sick to my stomach. When in The Mummy Returns Imhotep realizes what Rick and Evie have is love and he looks at Anck-su-namun imagining the same, but she just nopes out and he eats himself to the underworld. For real, he literally gave everything to be with that ungrateful hope, including getting mummified while alive and an eternal curse, and she just dips out at the first sign of trouble. I felt so bad for him. Mrs. Landingham, I miss my boys. Charlie, I never knew you had kids. Mrs. Landingham, twins, Andrew and Simon. I tried not to, you know. I dressed them differently, but they still did everything together. They went off to medical school together, and then they finished their second year, and of course their lottery number came up at the same time. Charlie, for the draft. Mrs. Landingham, yeah, Charlie. Well, I would have thought they could get the deferment to finish med school. Mrs. Landingham, they didn't want one. Their father and I begged them, but they wanted to go where people needed doctors. Their father and I begged them, but you can't tell kids anything. So they joined up as medics, and 4 months later they were pinned down during a fight in Da Nang and were killed by enemy fire. That was Christmas Eve, 1970. You know, they were so young. Charlie, they were your age. It's hard when that happens so far away, you know, because with the noises and the shooting, they had to be so scared. It's hard not to think that right then, they needed their mother. Anyway, I miss my boys. Scene, https://b/cc/Flusky. Littlefoot's mom in the Land Before Time. When I first saw it as a kid, it was the first time that I realized that my parents could die. That thought had never even really occurred to me at that point. Even now as an adult, that scene where he thinks he sees her but it's just his shadow and the narrator says, "Then Littlefoot knew for certain he was alone," is still burned in my memory. The death of the personal assistant in that Jurassic World movie, a complete side character that did nothing wrong, barely in a few scenes, gets likely the most graphic and prolonged death in the entire franchise. They really made sure to show you how terrified she was and how brutally she died. It was literally like 90 seconds on screen watching her struggle in agony and terror before being swallowed. It was honestly kinda fucked up, especially because there was a comedic moment immediately before and after the scene. It's like they want you to somehow enjoy watching this completely innocent side character die horribly. Those older Christmas movies were brutal. I remember one with the bunny and his mom, and a snowstorm came and they didn't get shelter, so the mom wrapped herself around her baby bunny while it snowed. Then spring came and the baby bunny crawled from under his mom and tried to wake her, but she was dead. I cried for hours. Don't even remember the rest of the movie. I think I was 8. Littlefoot's mother fighting Sharptooth, and her death. That scene really stuck with me for its intensity. Even for a kid's movie, Sharptooth was like a force of nature, as terrifying and all-consuming as the earthshake. When Littlefoot doesn't understand that his mother is dying, and his conversation with Router about grief and loss has stuck with me my whole life. I still can't watch that scene without crying. Funny thing is that was ripped straight from the comic. Only difference is the show added Abraham's death to that moment. There's an alternate take that was filmed where Maggie is killed in his place, so it seems like the writers considered keeping him around that on point would have made for good character development had he slowly devolved to a cold, ruthless killer. I have several, and I'm not a squeamish person normally, but there are some that are just so cruel or violent that they stuck in my head for a while afterwards. Final Destination 3, The Tanning Beds. Terrifier. Woman hung upside down and cut in half vertically with a hacksaw. Irreversible. Guy has head smashed in repeatedly with a fire extinguisher. The Poughkeepsie Tapes. Woman is wrapped in plastic and then has her jugular pierced so she drowns in her own blood. Saving Private Ryan. Guy gets wounded on D-Day and his guts are spilled out and he starts calling out for his mother. I probably have more, but those are the ones that spring to mind. I can't decide if I like or hate the way the movie did it. On the one hand, it's basically what the entire series was leading up to, since Katniss volunteered just to save her. To make it such a quick moment in the movie didn't do the gravity of the metaphor. Is that the right word? Justice. On the other hand, it really would happen that quickly, and just glossing over it like the movie kind of did was more realistic and left you with more of a what the fuck feeling. And yet she does break down. However wrapped in rage it might have been, regardless of how calm she seemed, she breaks cover. Not because it is tactically necessary or wise, but because it would get her killed. It's when everyone else has gone down and she's still marginally capable of fighting that she pulls it back together. It's a remarkably human moment from a character who generally had to be the stoic voice of calm reason. The thing about the book that really gets me is just how angry Harry Potter is afterwards at himself. Like Dumbledore is so calm, but Harry has all this rage and just starts trashing Dumbledore's office. It's also so heartbreaking because it was so avoidable. Harry went on this mission to save Sirius, whom he believed to be in danger, but was actually being tricked, and Sirius dies coming to save Harry. And what's even worse is that after Sirius dies, Harry finds the gift Sirius gave him. In the book, I believe they cut this out in the movie, that he never opened because they had a fight, and turns out Sirius gifted him a magical mirror that lets them communicate. If he had only opened his gift he would have been able to confirm he was okay and the whole thing would have never happened. Gets me every time too. It trips me apart every time I read it. Harry was so close to having it all, so close to getting to live with Sirius. Fudge saw Voldemort, he would have been a free man and could rightfully take guardianship of Harry. So many later deaths could have been avoided too. The Order wouldn't have had to do the extraction from Privet Drive in Deathly Hallows if he was already living in Order headquarters. So Hedwig lives and so does Mad Eye. In Midsommar, when the old folks jump off a cliff and then someone comes by with a sledgehammer to put them out of their misery, and they show everything. Then the scene in Midsommar when they discover the guy blood-eagled in a yurt still breathing. Then there is this scene in this movie Midsommar where a guy is paralyzed, sawn into the skin of a bear and then burned alive. Oh, lastly, there is this one scene in Midsommar where all the people who were previously killed in horrible ways were stuffed with straw as human scarecrows and burnt with a guy inside a bear. Another death scene was this bear who was in a cage in Midsommar, and you don't know why he is in the cage in the middle of this commune until the end, when he is hollowed out so he can be filled with paralyzed man who is then burnt alive with his already dead scarecrow friends. Edit. I forgot the first scene in this movie Midsommar where you see this middle-aged couple sleeping comfy in their bed, only to be taken to the garage where you see a bunch of tubes connected to a running car's exhaust. The tubes fill the house with carbon monoxide and you learn the parents have died in their sleep. Then you see that another tube is taped directly on one of their daughters' faces so she could commit murder-suicide. Second edit. I used to love horror movies. Then I saw this movie called Midsommar. Not a movie but a bit in Dexter when at the end of the series he comes home, thinks he's killed the bad guy and all is well with the world, but he walks into the bathroom and his wife is dead and the baby is sitting there crying in the wife's blood. Honestly, that hit me incredibly hard, seeing the baby there, alone, crying for its dead mother. My first child had not long been born when I scene at which no doubt contributed, but that scene has absolutely stood out to me in a horrific way for all these years. The guy who fled up the tree then gets ripped apart by dogs in Django Unchained. Something about being born into a world where you're completely powerless. Everyone in the country will report you on sight and send you back to your owner if you flee. In your short life you have no choice but to do as your owner commands, fight other slaves for entertainment, and the second it gives you an emotional breakdown your boss kills you in the worst way imaginable. The final game of Russian roulette in The Deer Hunter, where Walken's character kills himself. I saw that movie at around 15 years old, and that final scene is a culmination of pain and suffering that is frankly unimaginable. I broke down fucking sobbing after witnessing that. It is truly one of the most difficult to watch death scenes I've ever seen in cinema. The knife death scenes in Saving Private Ryan in 1917 come pretty close. Of course there's also more iconic scenes, but for sheer heart-wrenching sadness mixed with realistic gore and shock value, I can't think of anything else that matches that with realism. I think the reason being that it's entirely plausible that that happened to someone as a result of the Vietnam War. I like that one for sure, but it basically comes out of nowhere and is done. The one that got me from Tarantino was the cop in Reservoir Dogs. He's just lived through one of the most famous torture scenes in cinema. He got Mr. Orange to come clean to him and they had their little bonding moment. Nice guy walks in and everything seems to be going his way and like they're going to take him and Orange to the hospital to save their lives, and then, you say he tortured him? He was going to kill him? Like this. ... Fucking nice guy sticking up for his best bud. Immediately reminds the audience, and everyone in the room, that they're the bad guys and no fucking way they're letting a cop with info on the drop site or the players involved live. Not a movie, but Trick and Carl's reaction to Laurie's death was pretty triggering for me, as it was identical to how my dad reacted to me to my mom's death. My dad kinda looks like Rick and my mom kinda looked like Laurie. People laugh at that scene, but I found the uncontrollable funny weird sounds Andrew Lincoln made to be completely accurate. It's like you forget how to control yourself or what you should be doing and your body just struggles to even remember normal patterns of behavior and you let loose. Not my favorite show, but that scene really caught me off guard and I have a ton of respect for Andrew Lincoln as an actor after that. Honestly haven't seen a theater react to something so unanimously. We went to the first IMAX screening of it in our city. The entire theater was completely silent at the end, barely even a peep as we all filed after the credits and the stinger with fury. I remember leaving the theater and it was the reaction of the people in line that suddenly hit me. Everyone walking out looked so shell-shocked that the people in line for the next showing realized they were walking into something rough. Even seeing it again later that week, and again a week after that, it didn't change. Silence, every time. There is a scene in Saving Private Ryan where two guys are fighting upstairs and the German slowly slides a knife into the other guy's chest. As he's trying to stop him, another soldier is too scared to help and just hides in the stairwell and lets it happen. Once the German finishes killing him, he just walks past the coward who is hugging his rifle and cowering. I haven't seen the movie in years, so my details might be slightly off, but watching it as a 10 to 12 years old, it was one of the only times a movie has made me cry. Why didn't you help your friend? Two that I can think of. In Serenity, you know the one. If you don't, then I highly recommend you watch Firefly in Serenity. It's fantastic, even if its run was cut short by corporate politics. The host guy in Joker, sudden, immediate change in the scene, you can feel that the body's there but he isn't. Really, whenever a movie or show does a good job of conveying that feeling, the sort of suddenly this is a human-shaped inanimate object hit to the gut, it sticks with me. I have no idea what goes into it, I just know when they did it right. Job Hurt's death scene in Alien. I accidentally saw this as a kid, and it fucked me up for years. Now it's become one of my favorite movies. Lol. There's something about stuff that scares you that endears itself to you over time. There's been plenty of chest bursting in subsequent films, games, etc., over the years, but no one performed it as well as John did. I heard they even had to cut out some extra screaming and convulsing, in addition to extra blood, in order to keep the film from getting an X rating.